2025 is witnessing a brutal paradox, unlike anything in modern economic history. On the electronic tickers of Wall Street, stock indices may still be hovering near record highs, yet beneath that glittering surface, a tectonic rift is unfolding quietly, but violently. The figure of 950,000 workers losing their jobs in just the first 9 months of the year is not merely a lifeless statistic. It is a piercing alarm siren, marking the end of an era and the painful beginning of a new world order. This is the largest wave of layoffs since the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. But the nature of these two crises is completely different. If 2020 was a temporary freeze caused by an external biological shock, then 2025 is an active purge from within. UBS cut 48,000 people. Intel cut 24,000. Nestlé cut 6,000. Amazon cut 14,000 employees. The list reads like an obituary for the traditional business model. When giants like Microsoft, Meta, Salesforce, SF, and even old industrial icons like Ford and Volkswagen all move in unison, we can no longer call this a random phenomenon. This is the greatest restructuring in the history of the U.S. economy. Today's podcast episode will go deep into an anatomy of this wounded economy. To understand why this pain is happening, how it is repricing risk and growth expectations, and most importantly, how it will impact corporate profits, interest rates, and valuations in the U.S. market. Welcome to Inner Shadow, where you'll hear truths society doesn't want you to know. Post-COVID intoxication and the price of interest rates. To understand why this major surgery is taking place in 2025, we have to rewind to the recent past. 2000 and 2022 was an era of cheap money and excessive optimism, the legacy of an artificial boom. When the COVID-19 pandemic erupted, the U.S. Federal Reserve, Fed, and central banks around the world injected an enormous amount of money into the economy to prevent collapse. Interest rates near 0% encouraged many tech and retail corporations to expand at a reckless pace. Amazon once hired hundreds of thousands of people in just a few months to meet online shopping demand. Tech companies like Meta or Google also hired talent at sky-high salaries just to keep them on the bench, preventing rivals from securing headcount, regardless of whether those employees truly created value. It was the era when the phrase, "growth at all costs," became the guiding principle. Investors didn't care about net profit. They only cared about user growth and revenue. This created a bloated, overweight, inefficient workforce machine. The interest rate shock and the wake-up call. But every party eventually ends. Runaway inflation forced central banks to tighten monetary policy. When interest rates rose, the cost of capital became expensive, and cheap cash disappeared. Wall Street investors immediately changed their appetite. From growth at all costs to efficiency per dollar of capital, the layoffs at UBS, Intel, and Nestlé are the direct consequence of that shift. Many companies were forced to cut the excess fat accumulated in the previous period. They faced shrinking profit margins due to rising input costs, while consumer purchasing power began to weaken. Laying off 11,000 people at Intel or 4,000 at Salesforce is not just about reducing payroll expense. It is also a move to make financial statements look better in the eyes of increasingly demanding shareholders. However, if this were merely a normal economic cycle, overheating growth followed by a downturn, there would be little to discuss. What makes the 2025 restructuring truly historic is the entry of an unprecedented variable: artificial intelligence, AI. The AI paradox. When technology erodes humans, we often hear promises that AI will support humans and help us work more efficiently. But the brutal reality of 2025 is proving a different proposition. AI is competing directly with humans for resources. The capital expenditure versus OPEX war. In corporate financial statements, there are two key cost lines: capital expenditure, capital expenditure, investment spending, buying machinery, building data centers, purchasing AI chips, OPEX, operating expenditure, operating costs. Employee salaries are here. Employee salaries sit in OPEX, buying machines, building data centers, and purchasing AI chips sit in capital expenditure. The problem is that to compete in the AI era, companies need massive capital. An NVIDIA H100 or Blackwell chip can cost tens of thousands of dollars. A data center to train large language models can cost billions of dollars, consuming electricity equivalent to a small city. Andy Jassy, CEO of Amazon, had to acknowledge a bitter truth. Investing in AI improves operational efficiency, but it also makes many jobs no longer have a reason to exist. More deeply, to afford tens of thousands of AI chips and build expensive infrastructure, Amazon is forced to cut its payroll budget, meaning within OPEX. Money does not appear out of thin air. To increase AI capital expenditure by an additional $10 billion, they must cut OPEX correspondingly. Employee salaries. This is a shift in capital flows. From the wage pocket to the technology pocket, the $130 million trap. Statistics show that companies spend an average of $130 million per year on AI, a staggering figure. Pressure from 78% of investors forces CEOs to prove immediate effectiveness. How do you prove AI's effectiveness the fastest? Not by creating new products, which takes years, but by cutting staff immediately. If there is a $10 million AI system that can replace a customer service department of 500 people with a total payroll of $25 million per year, then the CEO's decision is obvious. AI doesn't demand raises, doesn't take sick leave, doesn't need insurance, and works 24/7. At Intel, laying off 24,000 people is not only because the chip business is struggling, but also because they need to concentrate capital to build foundries to catch up with TSMC in the AI hardware race. At Nestlé or Target, AI is used to optimize supply chains and marketing, making thousands of office positions redundant. The obsolescence of the white-collar class. The massive layoffs of 2025 mark the collapse of the mid-level white-collar class. In the past, automation only threatened factory workers, blue-collar, but generative AI attacks office jobs directly. Junior programmers, content writers, copywriting, basic data analysts, translators, and even HR staff. These people are highly educated, but their skills are being copied by machines at the speed of light and at nearly zero cost. Macroeconomic impact. The specter of double stagnation, laying off nearly 1 million workers in a short time, creates serious macroeconomic repercussions, threatening to drag down the world's #1 economy. First, weakening consumer demand. The U.S. economy runs on roughly 70% consumer spending. When 950,000 people lose their jobs and millions more live in fear that they'll be next, consumer confidence collapses. People save more, tighten spending, stop buying homes, stop changing cars, limit travel. This forms a downward spiral. Businesses lay off, people spend, less revenue falls. Businesses lay off again. Target's layoff of 1,800 people and many other retailers were among the first to feel this cold. Rising inventories forced them to discount prices, thinning profit margins, and then they had to cut staff again. The double stagnation spiral. Experts warn of the risk of double stagnation. The economy stagnates due to high unemployment, but prices may still not fall, even rising in some essential sectors due to supply chain disruptions or higher energy costs driven by AI. Moreover, GDP is pulled down. Tax revenue from personal income declines, increasing the deficit amid U.S. public debt already at alarming levels. The Trump economy and an unfinished promise. Trump has always taken pride in the stock market and jobs, but the reality of 2025 is pouring cold water on that pride. Protectionist trade policies. Tariffs may help certain domestic manufacturing sectors, but they cannot stop the automation wave. In fact, to stay competitive under high tariffs, companies are even more motivated to adopt AI and robots faster to cut labor costs. This is a thorny political problem. The government wants to create jobs for humans, while the market wants to optimize with machines. This contradiction fuels deep social instability and widens the wealth gap. Technology owners grow richer, while the working middle class is impoverished, and viewed through the lens of the U.S. market. This is not only a story about unemployment, it is a story about capital reallocation. Money is leaving labor costs and flowing into computing infrastructure, data, and automation. That is why stocks can hold up while jobs weaken, because investors are rewarding efficiency and profit margins. This also explains why the market is increasingly splitting clearly by sector. Businesses that can convert labor costs into productivity, AI, cloud, semiconductors, platform software, are often repriced positively. Conversely, models that depend heavily on labor and consumer demand are more likely to be discounted by the market as confidence weakens. The era of algorithmic economics, the mass layoffs of 2025, are not the end. They are the overture to a new economic model, algorithmic economics, and a new kind of corporate structure. In the future, corporations will no longer take pride in having hundreds of thousands of employees. The ideal model will be lean teams plus massive AI infrastructure. A billion-dollar company, a unicorn, might need only 10-20 exceptional people to orchestrate thousands of automated tasks. Profits concentrate in the hands of those who control algorithms and data. Extreme societal polarization. K-shaped recovery. The economy recovers in a K-shape, upward branch. Those who control capital, technology, and senior talent who can command AI income skyrockets. Downward branch. Low and mid-skill labor replaced, long-term unemployed, or stuck in low-wage manual service work. Adapt or die. The figure of 950,000 jobs lost is a personal tragedy for every family, but it is also an inevitable law of economic evolution. History shows. When the steam engine arrived, hand weavers smashed machines, but could not stop the Industrial Revolution. Today, we cannot smash AI servers. The only way to survive is to redefine human value. Qualities AI still cannot replace: empathy, strategic thinking, elite artistic creativity, and the ability to make decisions in morally ambiguous situations. For the U.S., this is pain for shedding its skin, maintaining technological superpower status in the productivity race. For investors, this is the moment to distinguish clearly. Whether profit growth comes from revenue expansion or from optimization through algorithms, because those two paths lead to very different valuations and risks. The 2025 layoffs are a wake-up call. The era of stable lifetime employment is over. We are entering an era of lifelong learning, where competitiveness is measured not by degrees, but by the ability to collaborate with machines. The world is changing more ruthless, but also more optimized. The question is not when the storm will pass, but what kind of boat you will build to ride the wave.